What would you do if the person you love most had no idea you existed? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? It had been 21 years, 3 months, and 13 days since David last saw her, Anna Reynolds. But time didn't dull the image of her face burned into his memory. Now, standing in the parking lot of a vineyard just outside of Santa Rosa, California, David's fingers trembled as he held the ivory and gold wedding invitation. Ethan Reynolds and Claire Monroe. Request the honor of your presence. His name wasn't even printed on the envelope. The invitation had come by accident, forwarded to his old college roommate's house, then sent to him with a note scrawled on a post-it. This looks like your son. Do what you want with it. David hadn't spoken to Anna since she disappeared in their senior year. One minute they were in love, planning a life together, and the next she was gone, leaving behind a voicemail and a void. Now his hands clutched the invitation to a wedding he was never supposed to know about. A wedding for a young man he'd never met, but one he loved more than anyone else on this planet. What the hell am I doing? He muttered to himself as he looked at the sprawling vineyard, the white folding chairs lined up in perfect rows, and the floral archway ready for an engagement party that would turn heads. He almost turned around. Almost. But then he saw him. Ethan. Tall, lean, with a jawline that mirrored David's at that age. Laughing as he adjusted a speaker wire with the crew setting up. A charismatic energy radiated off of him, confidence, ease, and sadness. Just a flicker of something under the surface. David recognized it instantly because it lived in him too. That's my son, he thought. And he doesn't even know I exist. He stayed at the edge of the event, pretending to be one of the grounds crew. No one noticed him. He wore a ball cap and sunglasses, the universal uniform of middle-aged men trying not to be seen. But then the moment came, the one he dreaded and longed for in equal measure. Anna stepped out of a white SUV in a navy blue dress. Elegant. Put together. But there was a tension in her posture, like someone constantly trying not to fall apart. And then it happened. Her eyes scanned the lawn and froze. Their eyes locked across 20 yards and 2 decades. It was like being slammed in the chest by a tidal wave. Her face drained of color. For a split second, the mask dropped. Fear. Regret. Recognition. Then, like a light switch, she turned on a smile and walked toward the crowd, pretending he wasn't real. You've got to be kidding me, David whispered, stunned. She's still hiding me. Even now. The next 2 hours were a blur. David kept to the shadows, moving around the perimeter as the engagement party buzzed to life. Toasts were made. Champagne popped. Claire's family, wealthy, East Coast, old money, gave off the air of effortless charm and deep suspicion. David watched Ethan shake hands, hug relatives, thank guests. He watched Anna beam at her son like the perfect, proud mother. And it made his blood boil. Not because she was proud, but because he wasn't part of that pride. Because she had stolen the chance for him to be there when Ethan took his first steps, played his first game, learned to shave. Every smile today felt like a thief's victory. Then, fate gave him a nudge. Claire's younger brother tripped over a power cord, pulling down a speaker. It crashed to the ground, startling everyone. David stepped forward on instinct and caught the second speaker before it fell. Ethan turned. Their eyes met. Just for a second. But that second hung in the air like a drawn breath. Ethan furrowed his brow. Something flickered behind his eyes, confusion, maybe recognition? Please see it, David silently begged. See me. But Ethan looked away, thanking him politely before returning to Claire. David exhaled. It was stupid to hope. He walked back to his car and sat behind the wheel, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Maybe this was enough. Maybe seeing Ethan from a distance was all he'd get. Maybe Anna was right to keep him out. What if barging in now just caused more pain? But just as he was about to drive off, he heard a voice. David? He looked up. Anna stood outside his driver's side window, arms crossed, jaw tight. He rolled down the window slowly. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Then Anna said, "What the hell are you doing here?" David didn't answer right away. He looked her straight in the eyes and replied, "He's my son." The last time David saw Anna before she disappeared, they were sitting on the floor of their apartment, eating pizza from a greasy box and planning a road trip to Oregon. She had her feet in his lap, a textbook in her hand, and that glow on her face, the kind that made him think this is it. They were both 21. Broke. In love. Certain that love would fix everything. It didn't. David Mitchell wasn't born into wealth or privilege. He grew up in Tacoma, Washington, raised by a single mother who worked night shifts at the hospital and always left hot meals in the oven with sticky notes that said, "Be kind today" or "Love louder." He was the first in his family to go to college, a full scholarship to UC Berkeley for mechanical engineering. He worked part-time at a garage and tutored freshmen in physics. Anna Reynolds, on the other hand, came from money. East Bay suburb. Country club family. Her dad was a corporate attorney, her mom ran charity luncheons, and kept a Chardonnay in the fridge at all times. Anna wasn't cold, not at all, she was fire. Smart, quick, funny, and impossible not to fall for. They met in a shared freshman philosophy course. She called Kant a tedious windbag, and he laughed too loud, earning a wink. Within a semester, they were inseparable. Their love grew in parking lots, in coffee shops, under the stars and borrowed blankets. And then she got pregnant. David still remembered the night she told him. Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped the test. He picked it up and stared at the plus sign for what felt like hours. "I'm scared," she said. He held her for a long time, then whispered, "We'll figure it out." And he meant it. He offered to drop a class, to work more hours. He was ready to fight for her, for the baby. But her parents didn't see it that way. The confrontation came 3 days later. Her father showed up at their apartment unannounced. He walked in like he owned the place, like he owned Anna. "You think you're going to ruin her life, and we're just going to sit back and let it happen?" her father snapped, towering over David. David stood his ground. "It's not ruining her life. It's our child." But that was the end of the conversation. The next morning, Anna was gone. Her number disconnected. Her roommate claimed she'd moved back home to think. For weeks, David called every contact he could. Letters. Emails. He even drove to her family's house in Danville once. The gate guard told him to leave or the police would be called. Just like that, he was erased. At first, David held out hope. He told himself she needed time. That she'd come back. That she'd tell him where she went, and they'd start over. But weeks turned to months. Months turned to years. And life demanded motion. David dropped out of Berkeley the following semester. He worked full-time at the auto shop, and eventually opened his own small garage in Sonoma. He never married. There were relationships, but nothing stuck. How could it? His heart was buried with a child he never got to hold. He kept one photograph of Anna, her smiling at Ocean Beach with wind in her hair, and one unopened box of baby clothes he bought when she was still 6 weeks along. He never stopped wondering. Was it a boy? A girl? Did they have his eyes? Did they know his name? And then, 21 years later, a wedding invitation appeared. Now, sitting in the driver's seat of his Honda, David stared at Anna through the open window. She looked older, yes, but still. Anna. Her voice carried the same sharpness, the same bite. "What are you doing here?" she asked again. David swallowed hard. "I got the invitation. It got forwarded to me." He reached into the glove box and pulled it out, handing it to her like a subpoena. "I didn't send that," she snapped, glancing at it like it might explode. "I figured." He paused. "But I had to come." She looked away, then back again, jaw clenched. "You shouldn't have." "Why?" "Because it'll ruin your perfect narrative," he said, sharper than he meant. Because if he finds out his father wasn't some deadbeat, but someone you cut out of his life. Stop. Her eyes flashed. You don't know what it was like. Then tell me. Silence. Anna stepped back from the car. Her fingers trembled as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I was scared. My parents, they threatened to disown me. They said they'd cut me off, ruin you. I didn't have a choice. David stepped out of the car, standing now. You had a choice. You just didn't choose me. That landed. She looked down at the gravel, her heels shifting uneasily. You think I haven't lived with that every day? Do you think I don't know what I stole from him? From you. David softened slightly. Does he know anything? About me? She shook her head. No, not a word. He ran a hand over his face. God, Anna. He's getting married. And he has no idea his father's alive. I didn't know you'd want to be involved, she said weakly. David gave a hollow laugh. I spent 21 years wondering if he even existed. Do you have any idea what that does to a person? Anna stepped back. What do you want? I want the truth to come out, David said. Even if it's ugly. Even if it costs us everything. He deserves that much. She didn't respond. Just nodded, once, before turning and walking away. David stood alone in the parking lot, watching her silhouette disappear into the glow of hanging lights and soft music. He didn't know what would happen next. But for the first time in over 2 decades, he wasn't going to disappear again. The soft clink of champagne glasses and the hum of conversation filled the vineyard courtyard. Rows of string lights glowed overhead like a canopy of stars, casting a warm golden tint across the elegant setup. Claire Monroe's family had gone all out, catered hors d'oeuvres, a string quartet, custom cocktail menus, and waitstaff in matching ties. Everyone was smiling. Everyone, that is, except David. He stood just outside the glow of the celebration, leaning against a cypress tree, half hidden in the shadows. His cap was pulled low again, sunglasses still on, even as the sun began to sink. He wasn't supposed to be there, not really. Not officially. But after the conversation with Anna in the parking lot, something inside him shifted. The time for waiting had ended. He had seen his son. He had spoken to Anna. Now what? Ethan was mingling with guests, a glass of sparkling cider in his hand. Claire was beside him, her blonde hair curled to perfection, laughing with ease, the poster couple for young love with a bright future. David couldn't stop staring at Ethan. He looked just like him at that age, same broad shoulders, same easy grin, same restless energy. But Ethan had something David never had at 21, security. Stability. The world wrapped in a bow. Or so it seemed. Excuse me, sir, a server said, appearing beside him. This area's for guests only. Do you have an invite? David didn't answer right away. His mind raced. He wasn't going to cause a scene. Not yet. Not here. Then a voice cut in from the other side of the tent. Hey, he's with me. It was Anna. The server gave a slight nod and walked off. David's heart pounded. Anna looked pale under the lights, her face drawn, but her expression was controlled. Like someone trying to hold a glass vase together with shaking hands. She gestured subtly toward a side path. Let's talk. Away from the others. They walked down a narrow trail flanked by lavender bushes. The music faded as they moved farther from the main area. Finally, Anna stopped near a small wooden bench and turned to him. I told you to leave, she said, voice low but sharp. I stayed, he replied. He deserves to know who I am. And do you think dropping that bomb in front of his fiancée and half of Napa County is the right way to do it? David crossed his arms. There's no right way to undo 20 years of lies. She stepped closer, nearly trembling now. You don't know what his life's been like. I raised him well. He had everything he needed, except his father. Silence stretched between them. I'm not here to hurt him, David said, quieter now. But I'm not going to disappear again just because it's inconvenient for you. She looked at him then really looked. Her eyes were glassy. He's happy, she whispered. If you tell him now, during this. I'm not going to make a speech with the band playing behind me, David cut in. But I want to meet him. Have a conversation. When you're ready. Or when I have to. Anna looked away. Give me until the end of the weekend. After the party. Let me find a way to tell him. David hesitated, then nodded once. Fine. But this is happening, Anna. One way or another. Back at the party, the energy had shifted subtly. A few guests murmured near the drink station. One of Claire's uncles gave Ethan a long, uncomfortable look. Ethan noticed and filed it away in the back of his mind. Anna returned, pretending nothing was wrong. Her smile was too tight, her laugh too forced. David stayed in the background, watching from near the side gate. That's when Ethan made his way over to the equipment table, checking something on the sound system. He knelt down to tape a cord to the floor. David couldn't help himself. He moved closer, just a few feet away, and crouched beside him. You've got a short in the line, David said softly, gesturing toward the cable. You'll get feedback unless you ground it better. Ethan looked up, surprised. Oh, yeah? You know about this stuff? David smiled just slightly. Little bit. Used to wire setups like this in college, back before everything went wireless. Ethan chuckled. Tech keeps changing faster than I can keep up. He paused, then stuck out a hand. I'm Ethan, by the way. David looked at his hand for a moment before shaking it. David. Nice to meet you, Ethan. Something passed between them. Brief. Unspoken. A flicker of something strange, like déjà vu or instinct. David could feel the weight of it in his bones. Before Ethan could ask anything else, Claire called out from the other side of the lawn. Babe, pictures. Coming. Ethan called back, then turned to David. Thanks for the tip. You a friend of the family? David opened his mouth. Stopped. Something like that, he said instead. Ethan smiled, then jogged off toward the camera crew. David stood there for a moment longer, heart thudding against his ribs like a warning drum. He'd just shaken his son's hand for the first time in his life. Later that night, as the guests began to leave and the moon crept over the hills, Ethan found himself sitting alone by one of the patio heaters, twirling the last of his drink. His mind kept drifting back to that man by the sound table. David. There was something familiar about him. Something in the eyes. The voice. He felt unsettled. And he didn't know why. Back in his hotel room, David sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his phone. He opened the Notes app and began typing. Ethan, there's something I need to tell you. I've waited your whole life to say it. He stopped typing. Deleted it all. Not yet. But soon. David didn't sleep that night. Not really. He lay awake in the quiet hotel room, the ceiling fan spinning above like a slow, ticking clock. His mind kept replaying the same moment, Ethan reaching out, shaking his hand, no idea that the man standing before him was his father. The contact was brief, but to David, it felt like stepping into sunlight after years underground. Something like that. That's what he'd said when Ethan asked if he was a family friend. A coward's answer. But what else could he say? Actually, I'm your father, your mother lied, and I just found out you exist. Not exactly champagne toast material. The next morning, David showed up early at the vineyard, parked in the back lot again. The staff was already working, prepping for a second-day brunch and cleanup. It was the kind of post-party gathering where people nursed hangovers and made polite small talk over overpriced pastries. He wasn't here for that. He was here for Anna. She had promised. Give me until the end of the weekend. But David knew that waiting for the perfect moment was what had kept the truth buried for 21 years. This wasn't about comfort. This was about courage. He found her near the main house, talking to the Monroe's event planner. Her smile vanished the second she saw him. David, she hissed under her breath, rushing over. What are you doing? I said I'd handle it. I gave you a night, he said evenly. That's more than I owed you. I'm not sneaking around like I'm a secret anymore. She glanced around, checking to make sure no one was watching. This is not the time or place. There never was a good time, Anna. That's the problem. Her face twisted with guilt and anger. You have no idea how hard this is for me. David took a slow step forward. And you have no idea what it was like for me. To miss everything. His first words. His first steps. His first heartbreak. I've been a ghost in my own son's life. Anna bit her lip. For a moment, she looked like she might break. He thinks his father ran off, she admitted softly. He thinks you abandoned us. David staggered back slightly like the wind had been knocked out of him. You told him that? I told him what I had to. My parents made me believe it was the best way. I was barely holding myself together. He stared at her, stunned. You didn't just erase me, you turned me into the villain. A door creaked nearby. Footsteps on gravel. They both turned to see Ethan walking toward them, holding 2 mugs of coffee. Morning, he said cheerfully. Then he slowed down, sensing the tension in the air. Anna's face went stiff. David tried to look casual, but his pulse thundered in his ears. Hey, David, right? Ethan said. The audio guy? David forced a smile. Something like that. I thought you left after the party, Ethan said. Didn't expect to see you again. David glanced at Anna. Her eyes were pleading. Not now. Not here. But David had already decided. There was no turning back. He looked at Ethan. No, he said quietly. I stayed because I wanted to talk to you. Not about sound equipment. Ethan frowned. Okay. I know this is going to sound strange, David continued. But there's something important I've been keeping from you. And it's not something I can keep quiet about anymore. Anna stepped in quickly. Ethan, maybe we should go somewhere private. No, David interrupted, eyes still on Ethan. He deserves to hear it from me. Not another lie. Not another delay. Ethan looked between them, confused. What's going on? David took a breath that felt like it might split him open. I'm your father. Silence. Even the birds in the vineyard seemed to go quiet. Ethan blinked, like he misheard. What? David nodded slowly. I didn't know about you. Not until a few days ago. I thought I'd lost you before you were even born. Ethan looked to his mother, searching for denial for anything. Anna couldn't meet his eyes. Is this true? He asked. She didn't answer with words. Just a slow, agonized nod. Ethan took a full step back. His hand gripped the coffee mug tighter, knuckles white. You told me he left, Ethan said to her, voice flat. You told me he didn't want us. I was scared, Anna whispered. I was young and my parents. You let me grow up thinking I was unwanted. I was trying to protect you. From the truth. Ethan snapped. His chest rose and fell in quick bursts now. He looked at David again, face unreadable. Why now? He asked. Why show up 21 years later like this? David looked down, ashamed. Because it's the first time I even knew you existed. I never got a choice. Ethan let out a bitter laugh. And now I'm just supposed to what? Be grateful? Hug it out? Pretend my entire life hasn't been based on a lie. No, David said quietly. I don't expect that. I want to know you. If you'll let me. Ethan stared at him for a long time. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away. Coffee mug still in hand. Shoulders stiff. Steps fast. Anna let out a shaky breath. Well, that went well. David didn't answer. His eyes were locked on Ethan's fading silhouette. He had done what he came to do. But the real work, the real pain, was just beginning. Ethan didn't stop walking until he reached the edge of the vineyard, where rows of grapevines stretched out toward the hills in quiet symmetry. He stood alone in the dirt path back to the house, jaw clenched so hard it hurt. The birds chirped. The breeze moved gently through the vines. It was the first peaceful moment in 24 hours. And he hated it. I'm your father. You told me he didn't want us. His mother's words echoed in his head like gunshots. A lifetime of memories twisted into question marks. He didn't even know where to begin unraveling it all. He had always thought he knew who he was. Solid, grounded, loved. His mother was firm but kind. His upbringing was structured. He went to good schools. He had a car at 16, straight as baseball trophies. He was that kid, lucky, even-keeled, responsible. He had built his identity on the foundation of being enough for his mom, who had done it all alone. A hero in his eyes. Now, that foundation was cracking. He sat on a stone wall near the edge of the vines and pulled out his phone. Opened a photo from last Christmas, him and Anna, both wearing Santa hats, hot cocoa in hand. He studied her expression. That perfect mom smile. And all he could think was, she lied to me. For my whole life. What else wasn't real? Claire found him 30 minutes later. She approached quietly, still in her linen brunch dress, her long curls pulled back loosely. She had a natural softness, but today, her eyes were sharp. There you are, she said gently. I've been looking. Ethan didn't say anything, just kept staring at the photo on his screen. She slid onto the wall beside him. Your mom's freaking out. I bet she is. Claire waited a beat. You want to tell me what happened? Ethan exhaled. That guy yesterday, David. The one I talked to near the speakers? Turns out, he's my father. Claire blinked. What? He nodded. She never told me about him. Said he abandoned us. Turns out she shut him out. I had no idea he even existed until today. Jesus, Claire whispered. Yeah, Ethan muttered. It's a lot. They sat in silence for a moment. A warm wind stirred the vines. Claire glanced at him, searching his face. How do you feel? I don't even know, he said. It's like my entire childhood just shifted sideways. Like someone took a piece of my life and rewrote it while I wasn't looking. Claire reached out, placed a hand gently on his knee. What do you want to do? I don't know that either. He looked at her, his fiancée. The woman he was supposed to marry in 3 months. The one he'd promised honesty and a life built on trust. And suddenly, he wasn't sure he could give her that. Not right now. Later that evening, back at his apartment, Ethan opened a drawer he hadn't touched in years. Inside were journals, old ones from middle school, high school, even a few college years. He grabbed one with a leather cover and flipped to a page dated March 10, 2011. We made family trees in class today. I had to make up a name for my dad. I asked Mom why we never talk about him. She said he didn't want us, and that was the end of it. It made me feel like a mistake. That line hit him like a punch in the chest. It made me feel like a mistake. He shut the journal. Eyes burning. He wasn't even angry. Not yet. That would come later. Right now, he was hollow. That night, Ethan didn't return any texts. Not from Claire, not from Anna. He just sat at his desk, staring at his laptop. He pulled up a browser window and typed, David Mitchell, Sonoma, California. A few results came up. Mostly small business listings. Mitchell Auto Garage. Independent since 2005. There was a photo of a man standing in front of a red Mustang, smiling slightly. Same man. His father. His real father. Ethan clicked on the website, half numb, half curious. There was a contact button. He hovered his mouse over it for a full minute before closing the tab. He wasn't ready. Not yet. But he would be. Back at the vineyard, Anna sat in her guest room, phone in hand, eyes puffy from crying. She had known this day would come. Had dreaded it, feared it, prepared excuses in her mind for years. And now that it had happened, just as David had said it would, she felt the heavy weight of her decisions like a chain around her neck. She picked up her phone and typed, Ethan, I'm sorry. Can we talk, just you and me? Please. I love you. She stared at the message, then deleted it, then typed it again. This time she hit send. It was 2:13 a.m. When Ethan finally opened his mother's message. Ethan, I'm sorry. Can we talk, just you and me? Please. I love you. He stared at it, thumb hovering over the screen. His first instinct was to ignore it. Let her sweat. Let her sit in the wreckage of what she'd built, without him there to cushion the blow like always. But curiosity was a stubborn thing. And underneath all the anger, all the numb confusion, one feeling tugged at him harder than the rest. He needed answers. So he replied, "Tomorrow. Noon. Your place. Just us." Then he tossed the phone face down and rolled over in bed, sleep still a distant stranger. The next morning, Anna was already waiting when Ethan pulled up to her quiet suburban house. The hedges were trimmed perfectly, the porch clean, the same welcome mat that had been there since he was 12. Everything looked normal. Nothing felt normal. She met him at the door with a weak smile. "Hi." He didn't respond, just brushed past her into the living room. The same old navy couch. The same framed photos. Christmas 2008, Halloween 2015, high school graduation. No David in any of them. "Can I get you something?" Anna asked. "Coffee? Water?" Ethan shook his head. "Just tell me the truth." "All of it." Anna nodded, already emotional. She sat across from him, hands clasped like she was praying. "I found out I was pregnant right before our senior year ended," she began. "David and I were serious. We were talking about getting a place off campus, about maybe going to Oregon one summer, living on nothing but ramen and music." Her smile flickered, then faded. "When I told my parents, they lost it. My dad threatened to cut me off completely. No school. No help. No money. Nothing. So you cut him out instead," Ethan said flatly. "I didn't want to. I swear. I tried to fight them. But I was scared, Ethan. I was 18, and I didn't know how to survive on my own. So instead of telling him and letting him decide, you made the decision for both of you." Anna flinched at the accusation. "I know. I hate myself for it every day." Ethan folded his arms, watching her carefully. "Why lie to me about it all these years?" Her voice cracked. "Because I thought it was the only way to protect you. I didn't want you wondering why he wasn't around, or thinking you weren't wanted. I figured, if I made it clean, if I gave you one story, you'd have peace." He stared at her. "You didn't give me peace. You gave me a fiction." Anna looked like she was about to speak, but Ethan raised a hand. "I don't want rehearsed lines, Mom. I want the truth. Every part of it." She nodded, then got up and walked down the hall. Ethan sat alone, tension crawling down his spine. A few minutes later, Anna returned with a faded manila envelope. She handed it to him like it weighed 100 pounds. "These are the letters he sent. After I left. After my parents changed my phone number, made me move back in. I never showed you because I couldn't face them." Ethan looked at the envelope. Old, yellowed paper peeked out from the top. Handwriting. His father's. He took it, opened it, and began to read. November 2nd, 2003. Dear Anna, I don't know where you are or if you're even reading this, but I had to try. You're the love of my life, and I can't make sense of you vanishing without a word. I don't believe you just left. I believe someone made you leave. If you're pregnant, if what we thought is true, I want to be a part of it. I'll do anything. Drop school. Work full-time. Move anywhere. I'm not scared of the hard stuff. I just don't want to be shut out. Please, let me be in their life. Love always. David. Ethan's hands were trembling by the second page. The dates stretched on. More letters. More hope. Desperation bleeding into every word. He wasn't reading words on a page. He was reading the slow heartbreak of a man being erased. He fought for me, Ethan thought. And he never even knew me. After several minutes of silence, he set the letters down. Did you ever write back? He asked quietly. Anna shook her head. Did you even read them? I read one, she said, wiping at her eyes. It broke me. I put the rest in a drawer and never opened it again. I told myself you were better off. I wasn't. They sat in silence for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Ethan stood. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel right now. Part of me wants to scream at you. The other part. He looked down at the letters again, voice trailing off. Anna stepped forward. You can scream. You can hate me. But please don't hate him. He didn't leave. He tried. You should know that. Ethan nodded slowly. I need to talk to him. I'll give you his number. No, Ethan said. I'll go see him myself. That night, Ethan sat in his car in a small parking lot outside Mitchell Auto Garage. The place was already closed. The lights were off. But he stayed anyway, staring at the door, thinking about what came next. He wanted me. He never stopped wanting me. Ethan didn't knock. Not yet. But he was there. And that meant something. Tomorrow would come. And with it, a conversation 21 years overdue. The garage smelled like motor oil, dust, and something Ethan couldn't quite name, something old and honest. The kind of scent you only get from years of real work. David was under the hood of a 2002 Chevy Silverado when he heard the bell above the front door chime. He wiped his hands on a rag and stepped out, expecting a customer with a brake issue or maybe someone picking up a car. Instead, he saw Ethan. For a split second, David thought it was a hallucination. Or a dream. Or punishment from a life lived with too many regrets. Then Ethan spoke. Hey. David swallowed. Hey. They stood there for a long beat. No noise, but the distant hum of highway traffic. You work alone? Ethan asked. David nodded. Most days. Ethan looked around, his eyes scanning the dusty workbenches, tools hung neatly on pegboards, half-finished projects frozen in time. This was nothing like the whitewashed world of wine country or brunches at Claire's parents' estate. This was real. Can I sit? Ethan asked. David gestured toward a stool by the workbench. Yeah, of course. Ethan sat. David leaned against the opposite bench, arms crossed like he was trying to hold himself together. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Then Ethan broke the silence. I read your letters. David blinked. You did? Ethan nodded. She saved them. Never sent them back. Never told me about them. I read every one. A rush of emotions moved across David's face. Pain, gratitude, disbelief. He looked like someone trying not to cry and failing. I didn't even know she kept them, he said. I figured they just disappeared. Like everything else. They didn't, Ethan said quietly. They found me. 21 years late. But they found me. David lowered himself onto an old metal stool, careful not to make noise. He looked across at Ethan, the first clear, unfiltered look they'd really had of each other. You look like your mom, David said. But you've got my eyes. Ethan offered a tiny, humorless smile. So I've been told. The room was quiet again, but this time it wasn't heavy. Just cautious. Like two people figuring out the edges of something fragile. I'm not here for a movie ending, Ethan said. No dramatic hug. No big emotional speech. I'm still angry. I don't know how not to be. David nodded slowly. You have every right to be. But I also wanted to look you in the eye, Ethan continued, and tell you that I know the truth now. And I'm sorry you didn't get to be there. David didn't expect that. You could see it in how he froze. I used to imagine what kind of dad you might have been, Ethan said. And then I stopped imagining. Thought it didn't matter. But it did. All of it. David leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I used to walk past playgrounds, see kids about your age. Wonder if you were out there. I almost went to court once. But I didn't have money. Or proof. Just a feeling. Ethan shook his head. She made you a ghost. I can't even wrap my head around that. David smiled sadly. I spent a long time angry. But now? I'm just glad you exist. That you're okay. That you're here. Ethan looked around the shop again. There were signs of a life lived in small details. Old baseball cards pinned to the corkboard, a coffee mug that read "Best Mechanic this side of 99, a cracked radio playing classic rock low in the background. "You ever get married?" Ethan asked. David shook his head. "Nope. Came close once. But I think a part of me always thought about the family I'd already lost." Ethan nodded. "You still think of me as family?" David met his eyes. "I never stopped." The words landed heavier than either of them expected. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, unsure what to do with the weight of it all. "I don't know what comes next," he admitted. "This wedding, my whole life. I feel like I've been living someone else's story." David gave a soft, understanding laugh. "You ever hear a car make the right sound but still have something broken underneath?" "Sure. People are like that too. Sound fine on the outside, but something rattling loose under the hood." Ethan let the metaphor settle. It made sense in a way nothing else had lately. "I don't know if I want to get married right now," Ethan said, almost to himself. David didn't react. "Then don't. Not until you're sure. You get one shot at doing it right." They sat for a while longer, talking in circles, sometimes just sitting. Then Ethan stood. "I should go," he said. "But I'm glad I came." David stood, too. Slowly. "Me too." There was a pause, an awkward, uncertain space between goodbye and something else. Then David stuck out his hand. Ethan looked at it. Then, instead of shaking it, he pulled David in for a quick, clumsy hug. Neither of them expected it. Both of them needed it. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. That night, Ethan drove home with the windows down, wind in his face, and the letters in the passenger seat beside him. He didn't have all the answers, but he had the truth. And for the first time in his life, that felt like enough to start over. The wedding invitations had already been sent. Claire's dress was hanging in her mother's guest room, perfectly steamed and zipped into a plastic garment bag with a satin tag for the future Mrs. Taylor. The venue was booked, the wine chosen, the floral arrangements finalized down to the eucalyptus accents in every centerpiece. Everything was ready except the groom. Ethan sat alone in his apartment, the invitation still unopened on his coffee table. He stared at it like it was a puzzle he couldn't solve. The embossed gold lettering, the delicate font, the names Ethan Monroe and Claire Bennett. He knew that version of Ethan. The one who showed up on time, made everyone comfortable, made decisions that looked good on paper. But after meeting David, after the truth shattered the polished image of his life, that version of Ethan felt like a character in someone else's story. Claire called him that night. He considered letting it go to voicemail, but something in his gut told him not to. "Hey," he answered. "You okay?" She asked, soft but direct. "Not really." Silence. Then she said, "You want to talk about it?" He hesitated. "I don't know where to start. How about here? Are we still getting married?" That landed like a brick in his chest. No lead-in, no sugarcoating. Just the question he'd been avoiding for days. "I don't know," he said, voice barely above a whisper. There was a pause. He could hear her shifting in bed, probably sitting upright now, awake and fully alert. "Okay," Claire said, carefully. "That's honest." "I'm not saying I don't love you," he added quickly. "I do. I always have." "But," she prompted. "But I don't know if I've ever been me in this relationship," he said. "Not really. I've been who I thought I should be." Claire was quiet. Hurt, but listening. "When I found out about David," he continued, "it wasn't just about him. It was about realizing I've spent years building a life on someone else's version of who I'm supposed to be." Claire exhaled slowly. "I guess I thought we were building it together." "So did I," Ethan admitted. "But now I'm not so sure either of us really looked at the foundation." They didn't fight. That was the most surprising part. There were no raised voices, no accusations, no slammed phones. Just two people sitting in a long, painful pause between past and future. 2 days later, Ethan drove out to the Bennett estate, the sprawling property where their reception was supposed to be held. Claire's mom met him at the door, overly polite, her disappointment radiating through a tight-lipped smile. Claire was upstairs, waiting. When he entered the room, she was standing near the bay window, arms crossed, eyes red but clear. "You look tired," she said. "So do you." Ethan walked over and handed her the engagement ring. Not in a dramatic gesture, not with an apology or a speech. Just quiet. "I don't think we're ready," he said. "Not because I don't care, but because I care too much to fake it." Claire looked at the ring, then at him. "I'd rather postpone than pretend," she said, almost to herself. Ethan nodded. They sat together for a while, holding hands, no longer fiancés, but still something. Something real, even in its uncertainty. Word spread fast. The indefinite postponement got back to Anna within 24 hours. She texted Ethan immediately. "Is everything okay?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he forwarded the message to David. David replied, "You good?" Ethan stared at the screen, then typed, "No, but I'm honest. That's something." That night, Ethan opened a blank notebook. He wrote one sentence. "I am not the lie they built. I am who I choose to become." He underlined it twice. Then he shut the notebook. Not everything had to be figured out at once. But for the first time in his life, Ethan felt like he had taken his first real step. And it wasn't toward an altar. It was toward himself. Anna stood in her kitchen, stirring a pot of coffee she didn't really want. The house was quiet, eerily so. No wedding planning calls, no group text buzzes from Claire's mom, no Ethan dropping by to pick up a tie or taste test the cake she insisted on ordering from that bakery in Napa. Everything was still. And Anna hated it. She kept thinking of his eyes the last time they talked. Not angry, not screaming, just distant, like he'd stepped out of her reach. She always thought if this day ever came, if Ethan ever found out, she'd be ready. But nothing about it felt manageable. Not when she saw the way he looked after reading David's letters. Not when she realized the story she'd spun for 2 decades had finally unraveled. And worse, she wasn't sure he was wrong to walk away. That afternoon, she did something she hadn't done in years. She opened a box she kept in the back of her closet. A wooden keepsake box with a brass latch hidden under winter coats and old scarves. Inside were photos. Old ones. Ethan as a baby. David holding him, grinning like a kid himself. Anna at 19, wearing oversized glasses and no makeup, looking exhausted but blissful. Handwritten notes. Ultrasound prints. A tiny hospital bracelet. She picked up a Polaroid. David asleep on the couch with baby Ethan curled against his chest. Her breath caught. She remembered that day so clearly. It was the last time they were all together. The knock on the door pulled her from the memory. Anna flinched. Looked out the front window. David. Her heart jumped, throat tightening. She opened the door slowly. "Hey," he said, awkward but not cold. "You got a minute?" Anna stepped aside. "I figured this was coming." David sat at the kitchen table. The same table they'd once argued over, about college, about jobs, about whether they were really ready to be parents. Anna poured him coffee without asking. "Old habits." "I saw him," David said after a pause. "He came to the garage." Anna nodded, her face tight. "He read the letters." Another nod. "He's confused. Hurt. But he's trying." "I know," Anna whispered. "I see it in his eyes." David leaned forward. "Why didn't you ever tell him the truth, Anna? After your dad passed, after you had your own place. Why didn't you just call me?" She blinked hard, fighting tears. "Because by then, I'd built the lie too well. And I was terrified that if I brought you back into his life, he'd hate me. He has every right to." "I know," she whispered. David sat back. "You know what he said?" "He said he's never been himself. That you raised him to be someone perfect. Someone safe." Anna looked down at her coffee. "I did what I thought was best." "But it wasn't," David said gently. "It was what was best for you. You were scared. So you erased me. Then you gave him a script and told him that was the whole play. Anna stood, walked to the window. I grew up in a house where emotions were weaknesses, where mistakes meant exile. I was terrified of making one. I thought if I could just give him a straight line from A to B, he'd be okay. David's voice softened. But he's not okay. No, she said. And that's on me. A long silence stretched between them. Then David asked, "Why did you really leave?" Anna turned slowly. Her lip trembled. "Because my dad gave me a choice: leave you or be cut off completely. No school, no home, no insurance, nothing." David's face went pale. "You never told me that." "I was ashamed," Anna said. "I told myself if I could raise him on my own, if I could just do it right, I'd prove I was strong. That I made the right call. But I didn't. I made the safe call. And I hurt you both." David leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I don't want to fight with you. I don't need an apology." "Then why are you here?" He looked at her, eyes steady. "Because Ethan needs the whole truth. And he won't believe it unless we both tell him." That night, Anna sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her phone. She typed a message to Ethan, then deleted it. Typed again. "Can you come over tomorrow? David will be here too. We want to talk. Just talk. That's all." She hit send before she could overthink it. The reply came an hour later. "I'll come. No promises." In the hallway, Anna passed the mirror. She caught her reflection, older, tired, scared. But this time, she didn't look away. She had lied to protect herself. But the cost had grown too high, and tomorrow, the truth would finally come out. The house was unusually quiet when Ethan arrived. The driveway, usually full of Claire's car and his own, had only Anna's sedan parked. David's truck was missing, which told him nothing good was on the horizon. He hesitated at the door, fingers brushing the handle before knocking softly. A moment passed, and the door creaked open to reveal his mother, standing in the doorway with that same cautious, guarded expression he'd known since he was a kid. "Hey," she said quietly, stepping aside for him to enter. Ethan didn't respond immediately. Instead, he just walked in, his shoes heavy against the floor, each step closer to a conversation he'd never asked for but couldn't avoid. Anna led him into the living room, the same beige sofa he'd grown up sitting on. The same coffee table, covered in magazines and family photos, though the faces felt like strangers now. David was sitting in the chair, arms crossed, his face unreadable. He didn't stand when Ethan walked in, but he did nod, acknowledging his presence. Ethan swallowed, trying to ignore the rush of emotions that threatened to overwhelm him. "So, what's this all about?" he asked, his voice steadier than he felt. Anna closed the door behind him and sat beside David on the couch. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap. She didn't look at Ethan directly but focused on the space in front of her, like she was gathering the strength to say something she'd been holding in for too long. "You've been asking questions," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "Questions I should have answered a long time ago. And I've been afraid of losing you, of losing the life we built." Ethan took a deep breath. "I need to know the truth, Mom. Not half-truths, not lies." David shifted in his seat, his eyes locking onto Ethan's. "We're both here, Ethan, to tell you everything. About me, about her, about why she did what she did." Ethan's heart beat a little faster. The words were coming, the words he'd been running from for so long. The ones that would rewrite everything he thought he knew about his own life. Anna closed her eyes for a moment, and then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "When I was pregnant with you, things were different. I was young, I was scared, and I had no idea how to be a mother. Your father didn't make it any easier. He had his own problems, and when I found out about you, it was just me. I had no one to turn to." Ethan's stomach churned. His father, he didn't know much about him, just bits and pieces. He had only ever seen pictures of a man who was smiling, but always distant. Always gone. The man who had never shown up for him. I left, Anna continued. And I didn't just leave him. I left a part of myself behind too. David spoke then, his voice low but firm. I never wanted to leave you, Anna. I never wanted to be just a memory. But I couldn't fight you anymore. I was trying to prove something to myself, something I didn't even understand at the time. But I wasn't going to be the guy who begged. I couldn't do that to you. Ethan didn't know how to process what he was hearing. His mother had kept this secret all these years. But why? Why not just tell him the truth? Why hide the man who was his father? What happened? Ethan asked, his voice cracking. Anna looked down at her hands, her face tight with emotion. I was scared. I thought if I told you who David was, you might grow up angry. You might not love me. I wanted to give you a perfect life, Ethan. I didn't want you to feel the hole that I felt every day. So I told you he was gone. I told you he wasn't coming back. And you never thought I might wonder why? Ethan snapped, his patience fraying. Anna's eyes filled with tears. I thought you'd be better off without him. I thought you'd be better off forgetting him. David's face softened with understanding. She did what she thought was right. She thought she was protecting you from the pain of not having a father. But in the end, she created her own kind of hurt. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. It was too much to take in. His mind couldn't quite grasp it all. His mother had kept him from knowing his father for his entire life. She had turned his family into a lie. The man who had written him letters, the man who was supposed to be his father, was real. And yet, he was a stranger to Ethan. I don't know what to say, Ethan murmured. This doesn't feel real. David stood up, walking over to Ethan slowly. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance. I'm asking for the chance to be a part of your life, if you'll have me. If you can ever look at me and not see a stranger. Ethan stood, too. He was trembling, the weight of this new reality crushing him, but there was a part of him that was finally starting to feel like it was breathing again, like he wasn't suffocating under the burden of lies anymore. I don't know if I can just accept this, Ethan said, his voice thick. I don't know if I can just pick up where you left off. David nodded, understanding. You don't have to. I'm not asking for that. I just want the chance to try. To show you that I'm not the man you've been told I am. That I'm not a ghost. Anna looked at her son, her face a mixture of guilt and hope. I've made so many mistakes, Ethan. But I'm not asking you to fix them. I'm just asking you to see the truth. To understand that I've always loved you. Even if I didn't always show it the right way. For the first time in what felt like forever, Ethan felt like he could breathe, like the weight of the past was slowly lifting, piece by piece. But he also knew it wasn't going to be easy. There were years to make up for. Years of silence, years of miscommunication, years of lost time. I'm not ready to make decisions, he said, his voice quiet but determined. But I'll try. I'll listen. And I'll try. David gave him a small, grateful smile. Anna wiped her eyes, a soft sigh escaping her lips. That's all I can ask for. Ethan left their house that afternoon feeling lighter than he had in weeks. But he also knew that this was only the beginning. There was a long road ahead, and nothing would ever be the same. But for the first time in his life, he felt like he was standing at the edge of something real. Something that could become his truth if he was willing to face it. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The air was thick with anticipation as Ethan sat at the small cafe table, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. The morning had been quiet, a contrast to the chaos of the past week. He wasn't sure how to start this next chapter of his life. He had just learned truths that he'd never expected, about his mother, about his father, and about himself. The sun streamed through the windows of the cafe, casting long shadows across the table. Ethan had come here to think. To breathe. But all he could do was replay the conversation with Anna and David in his mind. He wasn't sure what he was feeling anymore. Anger, confusion, relief, guilt, everything mixed together in a cocktail of emotions. Just then, a familiar voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Mind if I join you?" Ethan looked up to see Claire standing in front of him, her eyes soft with concern, her hand hesitating in midair as she waited for permission. Ethan motioned for her to sit. "I didn't think you'd find me here." Claire gave him a small smile before sitting down across from him. Her eyes were tired, but there was something different in the way she looked at him now, something softer, more understanding. "I've been worried about you," she said, her voice gentle. "I've been thinking about us, about everything, and I just needed to see you." Ethan nodded slowly. "I know. I've been trying to figure things out. Trying to figure out what's next, I guess." Claire reached out, her fingers brushing the edge of his hand. "You don't have to figure everything out right now, Ethan. You just have to take things one step at a time." Ethan swallowed hard, looking down at the table. "I don't know if I can do this anymore. I don't know if I can go back to who I was before. Before everything changed." Claire's eyes softened. "I don't expect you to be the same person you were before. You don't need to be. You've been through too much. We've both been through too much." Ethan finally met her gaze. "But that's the problem, Claire. I'm not sure who I am anymore. I thought I had everything figured out, my future, my life, my family, but now I feel lost. Like everything I thought was real is a lie." Claire's heart ached as she looked at him, the weight of his words sinking in. "I get that. I do. But maybe that's okay. Maybe it's okay to be lost for a while. Maybe it's just a part of finding your way back to yourself." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I never thought my life would be like this. I never thought I'd be sitting here, questioning everything, questioning who I am." Claire's hand moved to his, her fingers gently squeezing. "You don't have to have all the answers right now. We all have our moments of doubt. But what matters is that you're taking the time to ask the questions. And that's how you get to a place where you can heal." Ethan smiled weakly. "I wish I felt like I was healing." "You will," Claire said softly. "But it's going to take time. It won't happen overnight." Ethan took a deep breath, letting the silence hang between them for a few moments. He wasn't sure what to say next, but he knew he needed to open up more. There were things he hadn't told her. Things he hadn't even fully processed himself. "Claire," he began, his voice a little shakier than he expected, "I need to ask you something. I don't know if it's fair to ask, but I need to know." Claire raised her eyebrows. "Anything?" Ethan hesitated, then spoke. Do you think we could ever get back to where we were? I mean, after everything that's happened, after everything I've found out about my family, do you think we could have a future?" Claire was quiet for a moment, her eyes thoughtful. "I think the question isn't whether we can get back to where we were. I think the question is whether you can still be the person you were before all of this, or if you want to be something more." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" Claire smiled faintly. "You've spent so much time trying to make everyone else happy, trying to live up to this idea of perfection that's been forced on you. But I think now is the time for you to figure out who you are. Not who everyone else wants you to be." Ethan's heart tightened. "I'm not sure I know who that is." "You will," Claire said quietly. "And you don't have to do it alone." The words settled over Ethan like a weight. He didn't know if he was ready to start over, to heal. But the idea of doing it with Claire, of facing this next chapter together. He couldn't deny the small spark of hope that flickered inside him. "Thank you," he said, his voice hoarse. "Thank you for being patient with me. For not giving up on me." Claire's smile softened, her eyes filled with warmth. "I'm not going anywhere, Ethan. And neither is this. What we have, it's not gone. It just looks different now. But that doesn't mean it's over." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle over him. For the first time in what felt like forever, he felt like he wasn't alone in this. Like he could start to rebuild, one piece at a time. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Ethan met with David again. This time, they didn't talk about the past. They talked about the future, about what it would look like to start over, to build a relationship from the ground up. It wasn't easy. It wasn't clean. But it was real. Ethan also found himself spending more time with his mother. They talked, really talked, for the first time in years. It wasn't perfect, but it was a beginning. He wasn't sure if he would ever be able to fully forgive her for the years of silence. But he knew that he couldn't carry the weight of that resentment anymore. It was exhausting. Ethan was slowly starting to put the pieces of his life back together. The weight on his chest was lifting bit by bit. And while the road ahead wasn't clear, he knew that for the first time, he had the tools to face it. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Ethan stood at the edge of the lake, the cool breeze pushing against his face. It was a quiet, peaceful morning. The kind of day that felt like it was waiting for something to happen. And, in a way, it was. Ethan could feel the weight of everything he had been through, everything that had changed, pressing against him as if the world was holding its breath. He had come here to think, to clear his head. The stillness of the water and the rustling of the trees had always been a place of solace for him, a place where he could gather his thoughts. But this time, he wasn't sure if he could find the answers. His phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him from his thoughts. He took it out, glanced at the screen, and saw Claire's name. "Hey," he answered, walking a little farther from the water, his voice calm but distant. "Hey, you," Claire said, her voice warm but with an edge of concern. "You okay?" Ethan paused, looking out over the lake. "I'm just trying to figure things out, Claire. I'm trying to understand how everything fits together. But I don't think it does. Not in a way that makes sense." "I know," she said softly. "But you can't expect everything to make sense all at once. You've been through a lot. It's okay not to have all the answers." He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. "I've been trying to move forward. But I don't know if I'm even ready for what comes next." "Ethan," Claire said gently, "you don't have to figure it all out today. Or tomorrow. Just take it one step at a time. You don't need to rush. You're allowed to just be." Ethan's heart clenched at her words. There was so much he had been running from, so much he had been trying to bury, and it wasn't going to disappear just because he wanted it to. "I don't know if I can do this," he said quietly. "I don't know if I can fix everything. If I can fix me." "You don't have to fix yourself," Claire replied. "You don't need to be fixed. You just need to be you. And that's enough." He let her words sink in. Slowly, he realized that he had been trying so hard to control everything, to make everything fit into the perfect version of what his life was supposed to look like. But he was finally starting to see that perfection wasn't the goal. Healing was. Growth. And maybe, just maybe, it was okay to take his time, to let things unfold without forcing them. "I'm trying," Ethan said, his voice thick. "I really am." "I know you are," Claire said softly. "And that's all that matters right now." He took a deep breath. The weight in his chest, while still there, felt a little lighter. Maybe there was hope, after all. Maybe he didn't need to carry all the answers to make progress. "I'll be home soon," he said, his voice steadier now. "Thanks, Claire. For everything." "You don't have to thank me," she said, a quiet smile in her voice. "I'm here. Always." That afternoon, Ethan sat in the small office at his apartment, surrounded by old boxes of papers and forgotten memories. As he sifted through the contents of one dusty box, he came across a letter, one that wasn't addressed to him, but to his mother. It was in a familiar, yet foreign handwriting, and the moment he saw it, his heart dropped. It was from David. Ethan sat down heavily in the chair, the letter trembling in his hands. He didn't know if he was ready to read it, but the curiosity, no, the need to know, was too strong to ignore. He tore open the envelope and pulled out the yellowed paper, the ink faded but legible. His breath caught in his throat as he began to read. "Anna, I don't know what to say. I never thought I'd have to write this, but I know that things have changed between us. I don't know where to start, or if it even matters anymore. I'm writing this because I need you to understand that I'm not running away from you. I'm running away from myself. I thought I could fix things. I thought I could make everything right, but the truth is, I don't know how to be the man I thought I was. I don't know how to be the father I should be for Ethan. But I know that I'm not just giving up. This isn't about abandoning you. It's about finding the pieces of myself that I lost when I couldn't be there. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me. I don't know if I'll ever be the father Ethan deserves. But I need you to understand, I'm trying. I'm trying to be better. For him. For you. For me. I don't know what comes next, but I hope one day you'll be able to see the man I'm becoming and not just the one who left. David. Ethan's hands trembled as he finished reading the letter. The words, the raw honesty, cut through him like a knife. David hadn't just been a stranger, he had been a man fighting his own demons. A man who had been torn between his past mistakes and the hope for a future with Ethan, even though he had never known how to show it. Ethan placed the letter down on the table, his heart pounding. He wasn't sure what to do with this information. Was it a plea for redemption? Or was it just a glimpse into the man David had been, the one who had failed him? The truth was messy. The truth wasn't clean-cut or simple. And as much as Ethan wanted answers, he didn't know if the answers were enough. He didn't know if they could ever undo the years of pain, of silence, of absence. But something about the letter made him feel lighter. Not because the past was erased, but because there was a chance. A chance that the pages of his life could still be rewritten. Maybe not in the way he had imagined. Maybe not in the way he'd expected. But rewritten, nonetheless. Ethan closed his eyes, letting the weight of it all settle around him. The past could not be undone. The mistakes could not be erased. But maybe, just maybe, the future was still unwritten. Ethan sat in the park, his fingers tracing the edges of the letter from David. He had read it a dozen times, but each time, the words felt heavier. As if they were slowly unwinding a thread that had been tangled for years. His mind was a blur, and the peaceful sounds of children playing and dogs barking only made the silence in his head feel louder. The past few weeks had been full of revelations, most of them painful. The truth about his father. The letter. The confessions from his mother. He was trying to find his footing, but the ground kept shifting beneath him. The pieces of his life were scattered, and he couldn't make sense of them. What had been familiar was now unrecognizable. He rubbed his temples, trying to stave off the headache that was always there now. He didn't know how to feel about David's letter. On one hand, it was raw and honest. On the other, it didn't change the years of hurt that had already been done. His father had been absent, distant, and now, when it was almost too late, he was trying to make up for it. But was it too little, too late? Hey! Ethan looked up, startled, to find Claire standing in front of him. She was holding a cup of coffee, her eyes soft, as if she could already sense the heaviness in him. "I thought I might find you here," she said, sitting down next to him without asking. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He just stared at the ground, unsure of what to say. Claire's presence was both comforting and suffocating, reminding him of the weight he carried. "You've been distant lately," she said gently. "You've barely been answering your phone, and when you do, you sound like you're miles away." "I don't know where I am anymore," he admitted, his voice low. "I've been trying to piece everything together, but it's not working. It's like I'm stuck in the middle of something I don't understand." Claire leaned back, her eyes thoughtful. "You've been through a lot, Ethan. More than most people could ever handle. And it's okay to not have everything figured out." "I don't know if I can keep pretending that I'm okay," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't know how to move on from all of this." Claire reached out and placed her hand over his, her touch warm and reassuring. "You don't have to pretend, Ethan. You don't have to have it all figured out. But you do need to take the next step, even if it feels small." Ethan looked at her, and for the first time in a while, he felt seen. "I don't know where to start. I'm not sure how to forgive. I don't even know if I can." Claire's voice was soft. Forgiveness isn't about the other person, Ethan. It's about you. About letting go of the anger, the hurt, and allowing yourself to heal. Ethan's heart tightened. He knew she was right. Forgiveness wasn't for David, it was for him. But it was hard to let go of all the years of resentment, of feeling abandoned by the person who was supposed to protect him. I don't know if I can, he repeated. Claire gave his hand a gentle squeeze. You don't have to forgive him right now. Just try to make peace with the fact that you're carrying this burden. You don't have to carry it forever. I don't even know where to begin, Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible. Claire nodded. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to start somewhere. One small step at a time. The next day, Ethan found himself at the old family home, standing outside the front door. His heart was racing. He hadn't been here in years, not since he left for college. His mother had kept the house, but it felt different now. Strange. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, answers, closure, or just a place to start. He knocked on the door. His mother answered quickly, her expression softening when she saw him standing there. Ethan, she said quietly, stepping aside to let him in. I wasn't expecting you. I needed to talk, he said, his voice tight. I need to understand some things. His mother didn't speak immediately. She simply nodded and led him to the living room. They both sat down, the silence between them heavy, pregnant with years of unspoken words. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He wasn't sure where to begin. But the words were already spilling out of him. Why didn't you ever tell me the truth? He asked, his voice breaking. About Dad? About everything. His mother's eyes filled with tears, and she wiped them quickly, as if embarrassed. I didn't know how to explain it, Ethan. I didn't know how to make you understand. Your father, he was never the man I thought he was. And I didn't want you to hate him. I already hated him, Ethan replied sharply. I hated him for leaving, for not being there, for choosing everything else over me. I know, his mother said softly. I know. And I'm sorry. I should have been honest with you. I should have told you sooner. But I was afraid. I was afraid of how you'd react. I was afraid of losing you. Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to be angry. He wanted to scream at her. But something in her voice stopped him. She wasn't defending herself. She was trying to make him understand. I don't even know who he was anymore, Ethan muttered. The man who left. The man who's writing letters now. He's a stranger. His mother's eyes were filled with regret. He is. And you're right. He's a stranger now. But he's also trying, Ethan. He's trying to make up for lost time. For the years that he wasn't there. Ethan stared at her, feeling a wave of emotion rise in his chest. The anger. The sadness. The confusion. He didn't know if he was ready to forgive David. But he knew that he couldn't keep holding onto the past. It was like trying to hold a dying plant in his hands, desperately trying to keep it alive, even though it was already withering away. I don't know if I can forgive him, Ethan said quietly, more to himself than to her. His mother nodded. You don't have to. Not yet. But you need to start somewhere, Ethan. You need to let go of the hurt so you can move on. For yourself. The words echoed in his mind. For yourself. He wasn't sure if he could, but he knew he had to try. Ethan walked out of the house an hour later, his head spinning. The conversation had been difficult, painful even. But something had shifted. He hadn't gotten all the answers he wanted. He hadn't fixed everything. But maybe, just maybe, he had taken the first step. The first step toward healing. And for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. Ethan's world had been built on walls, tall, thick, unyielding walls that kept out the pain, the vulnerability, and the truth. For years, he had been the master of his own fortress, a place where no one could reach him, where he could control what he felt and who he let in. But the more he tried to push the past away, the more it clung to him, wrapping itself around his heart, tightening until he could hardly breathe. The conversation with his mother had left him reeling. It was one of those moments where, for a brief second, the walls he had built for so long cracked. He had allowed himself to feel something raw, something real. And in that moment, he knew that the hardest part wasn't letting the past go. It was letting himself feel again. His phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him from his thoughts. He pulled it out and saw Claire's name flashing across the screen. He hesitated before answering, running a hand through his hair. He wasn't sure what to say. What could he say? "Hey, it's me." Claire's voice was warm but laced with concern. "How's it going?" Ethan stood up, pacing slowly along the sidewalk, his heart still heavy from the conversation with his mother. "I don't know," he said, his voice thick. It's a lot to process, Claire. I don't think I'm ready for this. I don't know if I'll ever be ready." She paused for a moment, her voice soft. "You don't have to be ready. You just have to be honest with yourself about where you are. And you don't have to have all the answers right now, Ethan. You're allowed to take your time." "I don't even know where to begin," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I thought I had everything figured out. But now it just feels like everything is falling apart." She was quiet for a moment. "Maybe it's not falling apart. Maybe it's breaking down the walls you've built for yourself. Maybe it's a chance for something new." He stopped walking, staring up at the sky, as if it might give him some answers. "I don't know if I'm strong enough for that. I don't know if I can let go of everything I've been holding on to." "You don't have to let go of everything at once," Claire said gently. "But you do have to let go of the things that are holding you back. The things that are keeping you from moving forward." Ethan's chest tightened. The weight of her words settled over him, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a shift inside. A small crack in the walls that had kept him safe for so long. Maybe she was right. Maybe he didn't have to figure it all out today. But he did need to start somewhere. "I'll try," he said finally, the words tasting foreign on his tongue. "But I'm scared, Claire. I'm scared of what's going to happen if I start breaking down those walls. I'm scared of what it'll mean." Claire's voice was warm, reassuring. "It means you're finally free. It means you're starting to live for yourself, not for anyone else. You've been carrying all this for so long, Ethan. It's okay to let it go." Ethan exhaled slowly, trying to let her words sink in. For so long, he had kept his emotions buried beneath layers of anger and hurt. He had thought that keeping everything locked away would protect him, but all it had done was keep him from truly living, from truly healing. "I'll try," he said again, more firmly this time. "I'll start by facing what's in front of me." The next morning, Ethan stood at the doorstep of his father's house. He hadn't seen David in years, not since he was a teenager, full of resentment and anger. The memories of the man who had abandoned him were still fresh, still sharp. But now, standing at the threshold, Ethan realized that the man who had left was no longer the man standing on the other side of the door. With a deep breath, he rang the doorbell. David opened the door almost immediately. His face was older, more tired than Ethan remembered, but there was still something familiar about him. Something that tugged at Ethan's heart, despite the years of silence between them. "Ethan," David said, his voice hoarse. "I didn't think you'd come." Ethan didn't know how to respond. The anger was still there, bubbling just below the surface, but so was the longing. The yearning for something that had never been there, a father who had been absent, a man who had failed to show up when it mattered most. "I don't know why I'm here," Ethan said, his voice thick. "I don't know what I want from you." David nodded, his expression somber. "I understand. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I never did. But I want you to know that I've spent every day regretting leaving. I've spent every day wishing I could go back and do it differently." Ethan swallowed hard. "It doesn't work like that, Dad. You can't just wish things were different. You can't just walk in here and pretend like everything's okay." "I don't want to pretend," David said quietly. "I know I can't fix the past. I know I can't take back what I did. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. I've always been sorry." Ethan stared at him, the weight of his father's words hanging in the air. He didn't know what to say. didn't know if he could find it in himself to forgive him. But he also knew that this conversation, this moment, was a step. It was a crack in the wall that had stood between them for so long. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Dad," Ethan said finally. "But I'm willing to try. For myself. Not for you. For me." David's face softened, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "That's all I can ask for." Ethan nodded, feeling a sense of finality in the air. It wasn't a perfect resolution. There were still so many things that hadn't been said. So many things that couldn't be fixed with just a few words. But there was something there, something that had shifted. The walls, while still standing, had cracked. And, for the first time in years, Ethan felt like he could breathe again. As he walked away from his father's house, Ethan felt lighter. He didn't have all the answers. He didn't know if he would ever fully heal from the pain of his past. But he knew one thing: he was no longer running from it. For the first time, Ethan was facing the truth. And in doing so, he was beginning to break down the walls that had kept him imprisoned for so long. Ethan sat in his car, parked at the side of the road, staring at the half-empty coffee cup in his hand. His thoughts were a tangle of emotions, each one vying for attention. He had just left his father's house, and the weight of the conversation still pressed heavily on his chest. He was both relieved and conflicted, a mix of hope and uncertainty swirling within him. The air outside was crisp, a sign that autumn had truly arrived. It was the kind of day that made you feel like the world was shifting, quietly changing, whether you were ready for it or not. Ethan had always hated change. He had spent his life avoiding it, trying to keep things constant, keep them under control. But now it felt inevitable. The cracks in his carefully constructed walls were widening, and he wasn't sure how to handle it. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself, before tossing the coffee cup into the passenger seat. It was time to move forward. But how? Where would he even begin? His phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. He looked down and saw Claire's name flash across the screen. He didn't hesitate this time. He answered the call almost immediately. "Hey, you okay?" Claire's voice was gentle but full of concern. "I think so," Ethan replied, glancing out the window. "I just had a conversation with him. My dad, I don't even know how to feel about it. It's like everything's shifting, and I don't know if I'm ready to keep up." Claire's response was soft, almost like a quiet affirmation. "It's okay to feel like that. Change is hard. And you've been carrying this for so long. It's not something that you can just snap out of. But what matters is that you're trying. You're finally facing it. That's huge." Ethan exhaled slowly, resting his head against the seat. He hadn't realized how much he needed to hear that until now. "It feels like I'm starting over, Claire. And I don't even know what the next step is." "You don't have to have it all figured out," she said, her tone reassuring. "You just need to keep moving forward, even if it's just a little at a time." Ethan smiled faintly at the simplicity of her words. She had always been able to ground him, even when he was overwhelmed. "You make it sound so easy." "It's not easy," she admitted. "But it's necessary. You've already done the hardest part. You've let yourself feel. Now it's about taking those small steps, one at a time. And I'm here. You don't have to do it alone." Ethan's heart swelled. He didn't say it out loud, but the truth was, Claire had become his anchor. In the midst of all the chaos, she was the constant. And for the first time in a long while, he felt like he wasn't facing the storm alone. "I don't know what I'd do without you," he said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line before Claire spoke again, her voice low and steady. "You don't have to worry about that. I'm not going anywhere." Ethan didn't respond immediately. He wasn't sure what to say. Instead, he closed his eyes for a moment, letting the weight of her words wash over him. He had always been afraid of depending on others, afraid of opening up and letting people in. But somehow with Claire, it didn't feel like a risk. It felt like safety. "So, what now?" he asked, pulling himself back from his thoughts. What's the next step? There was a pause on the other end, and when Claire spoke again, her voice was filled with that same gentle certainty. You take the road ahead. One step at a time. You keep going. And when you fall, you get back up. That's how you move forward. Ethan nodded, even though she couldn't see him. I'll try. I don't know what else to do. You don't need to know, Claire said softly. You just need to keep trying. And I'll be right here with you. Ethan drove home, his thoughts still swirling, but now there was a new sense of clarity. The path ahead was uncertain, yes, but for the first time, he wasn't as afraid of it. Maybe that's what it had all been about, accepting that he couldn't control everything. That it was okay to let things unfold, even if he didn't have all the answers. When he got home, the house felt strangely quiet. Empty, even though it was his space, his sanctuary. He had lived here alone for so long, surrounded by his own isolation, that the silence had become part of the background noise of his life. But now, in this moment of change, it felt different. It was like the walls of his life were shifting, and everything felt a little off balance. He glanced at the kitchen counter, where a pile of unopened bills sat. He hadn't been able to bring himself to deal with them, not when everything else in his life felt so out of control. But maybe it was time to start. Maybe it was time to clean up the mess he'd been ignoring. With a deep breath, he walked over to the counter, picked up the top bill, and opened it. The figures on the paper didn't make him feel anxious or overwhelmed. Instead, he felt something unexpected, a sense of agency. He could take care of this. He could take control of the small things, even if the bigger picture was still blurry. His phone buzzed again, this time with a text from his mom. I'm proud of you, Ethan. I know this isn't easy, but you're doing it. You're moving forward. Ethan stared at the message for a long moment, the weight of her words sinking in. She had always been there, even when he pushed her away. She had never given up on him, even when he had given up on himself. With a small, almost imperceptible smile, he typed a response. Thanks, Mom. I'm trying. As he sent the message, the phone buzzed again. A message from David. I know I've said this before, but I'm sorry, Ethan. I'm here when you're ready. I want to be a part of your life again. Take all the time you need. Ethan stared at the message, feeling that familiar wave of emotion rush through him. The temptation to ignore it was strong, but instead, he hit reply. I don't know if I'm ready yet, but I'll think about it. He pressed send and sat back, staring at the screen. He didn't know where this road was taking him, but he was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as alone on it as he had always thought. The days ahead would be filled with challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But Ethan knew one thing for sure. He wasn't the same person he had been when he first stepped onto this path. He had taken the hardest steps, and though the road ahead was still uncertain, he was ready to face it. For the first time in a long while, he was ready to live. Ethan had always been good at keeping things on the surface, at pretending that everything was fine, even when it wasn't. For years, he had worn the mask of a man who had it all together, even when his world was crumbling underneath him. But as he drove down the familiar roads of his childhood neighborhood, he realized that he could no longer hide behind the walls he had built. The truth was, he had never really faced himself. Not completely. Not until now. As the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows over the streets, Ethan's thoughts turned inward. He hadn't spoken to his father in weeks. He hadn't seen his mother since their conversation a few days ago. And Claire, she had been a constant presence in his life, offering support and encouragement, but Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he was keeping something from her. Something deep, something buried, something he wasn't ready to confront. He parked his car outside his old house, the place where he had grown up. The house still stood, unchanged, but it felt different now. The memories of his childhood came rushing back, the laughter, the arguments, the emptiness he had tried to ignore for so long. It all hit him like a tidal wave, overwhelming in its intensity. He stepped out of the car and walked toward the front door, his heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't sure why he had come here. Maybe it was the need to face the past, to finally understand the things he had never let himself see. Or maybe it was just the weight of everything catching up to him. He rang the doorbell, his hand trembling slightly as he waited for someone to answer. A few moments passed before the door creaked open. It was his mother, her face softening when she saw him. "Ethan," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of surprise and relief. "I wasn't expecting you. I needed to come by," he said quietly. I think I need to talk." She stepped aside, gesturing for him to come in. As he entered the house, the familiar smell of old furniture and lingering memories enveloped him. It felt both comforting and suffocating, like a part of him belonged here, but another part was suffocated by it. They sat at the kitchen table, the silence between them stretching out longer than either of them were comfortable with. "I don't know how to start," Ethan said, his voice hoarse. "I've been thinking a lot about everything. About Dad, about you, about me." His mother sighed, her eyes softening as she reached across the table, placing a hand on his. "Ethan, I know I wasn't the perfect mother. I know I made mistakes. But I've always tried my best. You have to know that." Ethan stared at her hand for a long moment before looking up at her. "I don't know if I ever really understood that. Not until recently. I've been so angry for so long, and I've never stopped to think about where that anger came from. It's like I've been running from it." She nodded slowly. "I understand. I know you've been hurt, but I think a lot of that anger is tied to things that have nothing to do with me. Your father, he was always distant. He always kept things from you, and that affected you in ways I don't think you could see back then." Ethan's chest tightened as the memories flooded back, his father's absence, the way he had always felt like an outsider in his own home. "I never understood why he wasn't there. Why he couldn't just be a dad." "Because he didn't know how to be one," his mother said softly. "He had his own issues, his own pain. And he never knew how to deal with it, so he shut himself off. But that didn't make it any easier for you. I know that." "I never asked you about him," Ethan admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I think I was afraid to know the truth. I just wanted him to be something he wasn't." His mother's expression softened, and she squeezed his hand gently. "I know, but you can't keep carrying that weight, Ethan. You can't keep blaming yourself for things that were out of your control. You didn't make him leave. You didn't make him distant. You were just a kid." Ethan closed his eyes, letting the words sink in. For so long, he had carried the weight of that abandonment like a badge of honor, as if it was something he had to prove to himself. As if the pain he felt was a reflection of his worth. But in that moment, he realized just how wrong he had been. "I've been trying to hold on to all this anger, this resentment," he said, his voice trembling. "But it's eating me up inside, and I don't know how to let go of it." "It's not easy," his mother said, her voice soft. "But it's the only way forward. You have to let go of the past to make room for the future. That's the only way you can heal. And I think you're ready to do that, Ethan. I think you've been ready for a while." Tears stung Ethan's eyes, but he didn't try to hold them back. He let them fall, feeling the weight of the years he had spent pretending to be fine, pretending that he could handle everything on his own. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to feel vulnerable, to feel human. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "I've pushed you away for so long. And I've been so angry at you, at Dad, at everything. I just didn't know how to deal with it." She pulled him into a tight embrace, holding him as if he were still the little boy who needed comfort. "You don't have to apologize for that. You were hurting. But now, you're beginning to heal. And that's all that matters." Ethan closed his eyes, letting the warmth of her arms envelop him. It wasn't a perfect solution. There were still so many things that needed to be addressed, so many unanswered questions, so many broken pieces. But in that moment, He felt like he was finally starting to put them together. When he pulled back, his mother smiled softly, wiping the tears from his cheeks. "You've come a long way, Ethan. But this is just the beginning. You're going to have to keep facing things, keep digging deeper. There's more beneath the surface. And you can't be afraid to uncover it." Ethan nodded, a sense of determination settling in his chest. He didn't know what the future held. But for the first time in a long time, he was ready to face it. Ready to dig beneath the surface and confront the things that had been buried for so long. The weeks following his visit to his mother's house had been both grueling and transformative for Ethan. He was in uncharted territory, navigating the jagged waters of his emotions, trying to make sense of everything he had buried for so long. But there was something different about this time, something that made him believe he could actually face it. He had always thought of trust as something unbreakable, like a promise that was meant to be honored no matter what. But now he understood the truth. Trust was fragile. It could be broken, shattered, and it took time to rebuild. And the hardest part? Rebuilding it with himself. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, staring at his phone. The message from David still sat there, unread. Every time he thought about responding, a wave of uncertainty hit him. Could he trust his brother again? Could he let go of all the resentment that had built up over the years? The truth was, he wasn't sure. But he had to try. He took a deep breath and opened the message. "Ethan, I know I've said this before, but I'm here when you're ready. I want to be a part of your life again. Take all the time you need." The words were simple, but they carried so much weight. Ethan's fingers hovered over the screen, and for a moment, he considered ignoring it. After all, hadn't he already made up his mind about David? Hadn't he already decided that his brother had betrayed him one too many times? But then, a memory flashed in his mind, the time they had spent together as kids. The summers at the lake house, the late-night talks, the laughter. It felt like a lifetime ago. And it made him realize how much he missed having David in his life. Maybe it wasn't about forgiving him completely, but about finding a way to move forward together. He typed a response. "I don't know if I'm ready, David, but I'm willing to try. I don't want to keep holding on to this anger. We need to figure this out." As soon as he hit send, he felt a mix of relief and anxiety. The response didn't come right away, and as the minutes stretched into what felt like hours, Ethan began to question whether he had made the right choice. Then his phone buzzed. "I'm glad to hear that, Ethan. I know I've made mistakes and I've hurt you, but I want to make it right. Let's talk. Whenever you're ready." Ethan read the message a few times, the weight of it sinking in. David wasn't asking for everything to be fixed in an instant. He was asking for a chance, just a chance to rebuild what they had lost. And as much as Ethan was scared of the unknown, of opening up to his brother again, he realized he had to at least try. A knock on the door broke his thoughts. Ethan stood up and walked over, his heart racing. When he opened it, Claire stood there, her smile warm but her eyes full of concern. She could always tell when something was on his mind. "Hey," she said softly, stepping inside. "You okay?" Ethan nodded, but it wasn't convincing. "Yeah, I'm trying to figure some things out." Claire gave him a knowing look. "Like what?" He hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to put it into words. David reached out again. "He wants to talk. He says he's sorry, but I don't know if I can trust him. It's been so long, Claire. And the last time, he betrayed me. I don't know if I can forgive him." Claire walked over and sat down beside him, her presence a calming force. "I can't tell you what to do, Ethan. But I do know one thing. Holding on to that anger isn't helping you. You've spent so much time carrying this around, and it's eating you up inside. Maybe it's time to let go. Maybe it's time to rebuild, even if it's just one step at a time." Ethan let her words settle over him. She was right, as always. He had been holding onto his anger for so long that he had forgotten what it was like to trust anyone, let alone his own family. But he didn't want to live like that anymore. He didn't want to keep running from the people he loved, afraid that they would hurt him again. I'm scared, Claire, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. What if I open up and he lets me down again? What if I get hurt all over again? She reached out and placed her hand on his. You can't live in fear, Ethan. You can't let what happened in the past control your future. People make mistakes, yes. But you also have the power to decide how much of that past you're willing to carry with you. Ethan let out a deep breath, the weight of her words sinking in. She was right. He couldn't keep living in the shadow of his past. He couldn't keep holding onto the idea that everyone would disappoint him eventually. He had to trust both in himself and in others. I want to try, he said finally. I want to rebuild my relationship with David. But it's going to take time. I know that. Claire smiled, a sense of pride in her eyes. And that's all you can do. Take it one step at a time. It's not going to be easy, but you don't have to do it alone. Ethan smiled back, the first genuine smile in a long time. He knew that it wouldn't be simple, that there would be setbacks and there would be moments when he doubted everything. But for the first time in ages, he felt like he had the strength to face it. He wasn't alone, and he didn't have to do it all by himself. Thanks, Claire, he said softly. I don't know what I'd do without you. She shrugged with a grin. You don't have to worry about that. I'm not going anywhere. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt a sense of peace settle in his chest. There was work to do, so much to rebuild. But he was no longer afraid of the challenge, because this time he wasn't facing it alone. The morning air was crisp, and the world outside felt still, as if it were holding its breath. Ethan stood by the window, staring out at the world beyond, his thoughts a jumbled mess. Today was the day. The first step. He'd agreed to meet David at a small coffee shop on the edge of town, a neutral place, a place where they could start over, even if just a little bit. The message had come through last night, and David had asked him to meet in person. There were no promises, no grand gestures, just a simple request to sit down and talk. It felt strange, like trying to break through a wall that had been in place for years. Could a conversation really heal the years of distance between them? Could it rebuild what had been broken? Ethan's hand trembled slightly as he poured himself a cup of coffee. The bitterness of the drink matched the nervousness bubbling up inside of him. He had so many questions, so many doubts. But there was a part of him, a small part that had been buried beneath the years of anger, that wanted to believe in the possibility of healing. He couldn't keep living in the past, replaying the mistakes and regrets over and over. It was time to move forward. But how? He checked the time. The meeting was in less than an hour. There was no turning back now. He grabbed his jacket and made his way to the door, taking a deep breath as he stepped outside. The chill of the morning air hit his face, and for a moment it steadied him. This was it. The first step. When Ethan arrived at the coffee shop, he was relieved to see that it was relatively quiet. A few people sat scattered at tables, sipping their drinks, absorbed in their own worlds. It was a comfortable, unassuming place, a far cry from the tension that seemed to hang over Ethan's shoulders. He found a table by the window, his hands nervously fidgeting in his lap as he waited. The minutes stretched on, each one feeling like an eternity. He watched the door, his heart racing each time it opened. The anticipation was suffocating, the uncertainty hanging in the air like a thick fog. What if this didn't go as planned? What if they couldn't bridge the gap between them? And then he saw David. It wasn't the grand entrance Ethan had imagined. No dramatic music, no heartfelt reunion. It was just David, walking through the door with a hesitant, almost apologetic look on his face. He was dressed casually, but his eyes betrayed the anxiety that mirrored Ethan's own. When their eyes met, there was a brief moment of silence, like two strangers trying to reconnect. David hesitated, standing just inside the door as if unsure whether to approach. Ethan gave a small nod, and after a moment's pause, David walked over and sat across from him. The air between them was heavy, thick with unspoken words. "Hey," David said quietly, his voice laced with uncertainty. Ethan managed a nod. Hey. For a moment, neither of them knew where to start. It was as if they had forgotten how to talk to each other, how to navigate the complex, tangled mess of their past. There were years of hurt, of betrayal, of silence. How could they even begin to unpack all of that? I'm sorry, Ethan, David said after a long pause. His voice was raw, honest. I know I've screwed up. I know I've hurt you. And I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I don't even expect things to be the way they were before, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. I've been a terrible brother. Ethan sat back in his chair, studying David for a moment. There it was, the admission he'd been waiting for. The apology. It wasn't perfect, and it didn't erase everything that had happened, but it was a start. A small, fragile start. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt a glimmer of something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. I know you're sorry, Ethan said quietly, his voice steady, but his heart pounding. But it's not just about that. It's about everything that led up to it. The lies. The betrayal. The years of silence. It's hard, David. It's really hard to just let go of all of that. David nodded, his eyes filled with regret. I get it. And I'm not asking you to forget everything, or to just forgive me because I'm saying I'm sorry. I'm asking for a chance, Ethan. A chance to rebuild what we had. I don't know how to fix it all, but I want to try. The sincerity in David's eyes was undeniable, and for a moment, Ethan almost believed him. But doubt lingered at the edges of his mind, like a shadow he couldn't shake. Could he trust his brother again? Could he open himself up to someone who had hurt him so deeply? I don't know how to start, Ethan admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I've spent so long being angry. I don't know if I even know how to be your brother anymore. David looked down at his coffee cup, a deep sigh escaping his lips. I don't expect things to go back to the way they were overnight. It's going to take time, I know that. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes, Ethan. To prove to you that I'm not the same person I was. I'm not asking for your trust right away, but I want to earn it. I'll take whatever steps it takes. One day at a time. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his mind swirling. It was hard to trust, harder still to believe that things could change. But as he looked at David, he realized that there was no magic moment, no simple solution. Healing wasn't instant. It wasn't easy. It was going to take work, patience, and vulnerability from both of them. I don't know if I can just jump into it, Ethan said slowly, choosing his words carefully. But I'm willing to try too. Maybe we can start with small things. Maybe just talking. Seeing where it goes. David's face softened, a look of relief washing over him. That's all I want, Ethan. A chance. A place to start. They sat there for a while, the conversation shifting to smaller topics, safe things, things that didn't touch the deep wounds they were still carrying. But there was something different now, something that hadn't been there before. There was a tentative hope, a fragile thread of possibility that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. As they stood to leave, David hesitated. I'll call you later? Maybe we can grab a beer or something, talk more. Ethan gave a small nod. Yeah, that sounds good. For the first time in a long while, he felt like the first step had been taken, not just toward rebuilding his relationship with David, but toward rebuilding himself. The days that followed felt like a fragile truce between Ethan and David. There were no grand gestures, no sweeping declarations of forgiveness, but there was a sense of quiet understanding. It was as if they were both standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at the uncertain ground below. The road ahead was rocky and steep, but it was the only way forward. Ethan had agreed to meet David again, this time for a casual lunch. It wasn't much, but it was something. Just the two of them, sitting across from each other, eating a meal like they hadn't done in years. It was a small step, but it was the first step toward rebuilding the bond they had once shared. As Ethan walked into the cafe, he saw David already sitting at a table by the window. He was fidgeting with a napkin, his usual nervous energy evident. Ethan couldn't help but smile to himself. Something's never changed. Hey, Ethan said as he approached, giving David a nod. David looked up and smiled, his relief obvious. Hey man, glad you could make it. Ethan sat down across from him, the two of them falling into an easy, if slightly awkward, silence. Neither of them knew exactly where to begin. The air between them was still heavy with everything left unsaid. The years of resentment, the betrayal, the broken promises. But for now, they would let that hang in the background. They didn't need to dive into everything all at once. So, David said, trying to break the silence. How's everything going with Claire? Ethan's face softened at the mention of her name. She's doing well. We're both adjusting to everything. It's been a lot, but she's been there for me through all of this. David nodded, a small smile crossing his face. I'm glad. I always liked her. She's a good person. You're lucky to have her. Ethan smiled faintly. I know. She's been a rock for me. They both fell into another stretch of silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable this time. There was something almost soothing about the quiet between them. It wasn't the silence of old grudges, but the silence of two people trying to find their way back to each other. After a few moments, David cleared his throat. You know, Ethan, I've been thinking a lot about everything. And I just want to say again how sorry I am for what happened. I can't change the past, but I want to be a better person. A better brother. I know I've let you down too many times to count, but I want to try. For real this time. Ethan's heart clenched at the sincerity in David's voice. He'd heard apologies before too many times, in fact, but this one felt different. This one felt real. I know, Ethan said quietly. I know you're trying. And I'm not going to pretend like everything's okay overnight. It's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of time. David nodded in agreement, his expression serious. I get that. And I'm not asking for everything to be fixed right away. I'm just asking for the chance to try, to show you that I can be better. Ethan studied his brother for a long moment. There was a vulnerability in David's eyes that he hadn't seen in years. A willingness to be open, to be honest. It was almost like he was laying himself bare in front of Ethan, not asking for forgiveness, but simply hoping for a chance. I'm not sure I can just forget everything, Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. I can't just act like the past doesn't exist. But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to take it one step at a time. David's face lit up with a cautious hope. That's all I'm asking for, Ethan. One step at a time. The waitress came over to take their order, and for a while, they focused on small talk, safe topics that didn't require them to dig too deep into their past. They talked about the weather, about the town they'd grown up in, about their plans for the upcoming weeks. It was all surface-level stuff, but it felt good to share these small moments with David again. It felt like a flicker of something familiar, something they had once shared. As they ate, the conversation naturally drifted toward the things that really mattered. The things they had been avoiding. Ethan took a deep breath before speaking. You know, Ethan said, looking at his brother. This whole thing, it's not just about what happened between us. It's about me too. I've been holding on to so much anger, so much hurt. I didn't know how to let it go. And maybe I still don't. David looked at him, his eyes soft with understanding. I get that, Ethan. Believe me, I do. I've been carrying my own guilt around for so long, thinking I could never make things right. I've realized that I can't change the past, but I can try to be better now. I don't want to lose you again. Ethan's heart tightened, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a spark of something inside him. Something that had been buried beneath the years of bitterness and pain. A glimmer of hope. It wasn't a certainty. It wasn't an instant fix. But it was the first real connection he had felt with David in years. I don't want to lose you either, Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. But I'm not going to lie and say this is going to be easy. It's going to take time, and there are going to be moments when I want to give up. But I want to try, David. I really do. David smiled, a small but sincere smile, and raised his glass. To trying. To one step at a time. Ethan clinked his glass against David's, feeling a mixture of hope and uncertainty swirling inside him. He knew that the road ahead would be long. There would be setbacks, misunderstandings, and moments when it seemed like they were back at square one. But for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt like the journey might be worth it. He didn't know how it would all turn out, but he knew he was ready to face it, one step at a time. It had been a few weeks since the lunch with David, and the fragile truce between them seemed to be holding. Ethan wasn't sure what he had expected. Perhaps a quick resolution, a magical moment where everything fell into place and the weight of their past could be lifted. But life wasn't like that. Rebuilding a relationship was hard work, slow and painstaking. It required more than just apologies and promises. It required action. David had kept his word. He'd called more frequently, sent the occasional message, and even reached out to arrange small get-togethers. Nothing big, nothing overwhelming, but consistent effort. Ethan could feel it. He could feel the change in the air, like a slight shift in the wind. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Today was another step forward. Ethan had agreed to meet David at a local brewery after work. They talked about grabbing a drink, catching up in a relaxed setting. It wasn't a huge commitment, but it was something, and that was enough. It was another test, another attempt to break through the walls they had spent so long building. Ethan arrived at the brewery a few minutes early. The place was bustling with people, laughter and chatter filling the air. It was a warm, inviting atmosphere, nothing fancy, but it had a charm that made it feel comfortable. He found a table in the back, near a corner where they could talk without too much distraction. He sat down, trying to calm his nerves. It was silly, really. He had been through so much in the past few months, yet here he was, feeling like he was walking on eggshells. It wasn't that he was afraid of David. It was more about the uncertainty of what lay ahead. They were testing the waters, yes, but how deep was the water? Would they both sink, or would they float? A few minutes later, David arrived, a casual smile on his face. "Hey, man. Sorry I'm a little late," he said, sitting down across from Ethan. Ethan smiled back, trying to shake off the tension in his chest. "No problem. I just got here myself." David waved over the bartender, ordering 2 beers for them both. "So, how's work going?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. It was a safe question, one of those simple, surface-level things they could talk about without diving too deep. Ethan appreciated that. He didn't want to jump into heavy conversation right away. They needed to rebuild slowly, like 2 people walking a tightrope, careful not to fall. "Work's good," Ethan said, taking a sip of his beer as it was brought to the table. "Busy, but manageable. How about you?" "Same," David replied. "Just trying to keep my head above water." For a few minutes, they talked about their daily routines, the little things that didn't matter much, but served as a comfortable distraction. They laughed over trivial stories and cracked jokes, the kind of conversations they used to have before everything fell apart. It was easy, almost effortless. And that was the problem. Ethan could feel himself slipping into old patterns, the ones where they'd pretend everything was fine, where they'd bury the tough conversations under layers of small talk. He knew they couldn't stay in this place forever. There were things they needed to talk about, things they needed to face. After a long pause, David set his beer down, his expression shifting slightly. "Ethan," he began, his voice softer now, "there's something I've been meaning to say. Something that I've been avoiding." Ethan felt his stomach tighten. It was that familiar feeling, the one that crept up when the conversation shifted into dangerous territory. But he knew it was coming, knew that they couldn't keep dancing around the real issues. "What is it?" Ethan asked, his voice calm, though his mind was racing. David took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about Mom. About everything that happened, and how I didn't really handle it. Well, I've been a coward, not stepping up when you needed me. I don't even know if I've ever told you this, but I'm sorry for that." I'm sorry for not being there when you needed me most. The words hit Ethan harder than he expected. He hadn't anticipated this kind of honesty, not yet, not this soon. His throat tightened as the weight of the past months crashed into him. David had always been the one to avoid difficult topics, the one who shied away from emotions. To hear him acknowledge his own failures was a shock. Ethan let the silence stretch for a moment, gathering his thoughts. He hadn't been sure whether David truly understood the depth of his actions, the pain he had caused. But now, sitting across from him, he could see the remorse in his brother's eyes. It wasn't a perfect apology, it never would be, but it was real. I appreciate that, David, Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. I really do. I've been angry for so long and I didn't know how to handle everything, either. I didn't know how to deal with Mom's death, and I didn't know how to deal with you not being there. But I know that I pushed you away, too. I've made my own mistakes. David nodded, his face a mixture of guilt and relief. I didn't know how to fix things. And I know that doesn't make it right, but I've been trying, Ethan. I really have. Ethan stared into his brother's eyes for a moment, letting the weight of the conversation settle over him. It was strange, this moment of honesty. It felt raw, vulnerable, but also freeing. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt like he was truly hearing David, not the person who had let him down, but the person who was trying to make things right. I know, Ethan said quietly. And I'm not going to lie and say it doesn't still hurt. But I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to give you a chance. David gave him a small, tentative smile. That's all I'm asking for. The conversation turned back to safer ground, but this time, the air between them felt different. There was still a long way to go, a mountain of emotions and past hurts to climb, but they were moving in the right direction. They were testing the waters, but the more they waded in, the more they realized it wasn't so terrifying. The water wasn't as deep as they'd feared. Ethan finished his beer and leaned back in his chair, a sense of relief settling over him. He didn't know where this journey with David would take them, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like it was worth the risk. Weeks had passed since that pivotal conversation at the brewery. There had been progress, small moments of connection between Ethan and David that felt like delicate steps toward healing. But as the days went by, Ethan began to realize that the path they were walking was not as clear as it had seemed. Old wounds had been reopened, and though they were attempting to stitch the fabric of their fractured relationship back together, it was a process filled with setbacks. The more Ethan tried to move forward, the more the past seemed to drag him back. There were moments when he could feel himself slipping into the familiar patterns of anger and frustration, feelings he thought he had left behind. It wasn't that he didn't want to forgive David, but there were times when the hurt and the betrayal resurfaced, and it felt like they would never truly move past it. One evening, as Ethan sat in his living room, staring at the dimly lit screen of his phone, he felt the familiar tension building in his chest. The past few weeks had been full of tentative steps toward reconciliation, but tonight, something felt different. David had sent a message earlier that day asking if they could meet for coffee, but something about the request felt like an obligation, not a genuine attempt at rebuilding their relationship. Maybe it was the pressure that Ethan felt to keep things moving forward, or maybe it was the reminder of all the years they had wasted. Whatever it was, it made him uneasy. His phone buzzed again, this time a message from Claire. She was his steady anchor through all of this, her patience, her understanding, the way she could always find the right words to help him navigate the chaos inside his head. Hey, love. How's it going with David? Ethan ran a hand through his hair, unsure of how to answer. He stared at the message for a moment before replying. We're doing okay. I'm trying, but I don't know. It's hard. I want to move forward, but it feels like I keep getting stuck in the past. The reply came almost instantly. It's okay to feel that way. You're doing the best you can. Just don't forget to take care of yourself in the process. You don't have to rush anything. Ethan read her message again, feeling the weight of her words. She was right, of course. He had been so focused on fixing things with David that he had forgotten to check in with himself, to allow himself the space to heal in his own way. He had been pushing forward without giving himself the time and energy to process the years of hurt, to understand what it truly meant to forgive. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was David calling. Ethan hesitated before answering, his stomach tightening with the familiar dread that came with every conversation about the past. "Hey," he answered, trying to keep his voice steady. "Hey, man, you got a minute?" David's voice was hesitant, almost as if he were afraid of Ethan's response. "Yeah, what's up?" David was quiet for a moment before speaking again. "I've been thinking a lot. I know we've been trying to work through things, but I can't shake this feeling that we're not really addressing the big stuff. The stuff that really matters." Ethan leaned back in his chair, his fingers tracing the edge of the coffee table in front of him. He could feel the conversation shifting into dangerous territory. This wasn't just about small talk anymore. This was about confronting the things that neither of them had truly been able to face. "What do you mean?" Ethan asked, keeping his tone neutral. David's voice dropped lower, the weight of his words settling between them. "I'm talking about the things we never really talked about. About Mom. About how we both dealt with it, how we didn't. How I wasn't there for you when you needed me the most. How I chose to ignore what was happening because I didn't know how to deal with it. And now here we are, trying to make things right, but we're still not facing the hard truth." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He had known this conversation was coming, but hearing it out loud, hearing David acknowledge the depth of their pain, made the room feel smaller, like the walls were closing in on him. He had spent so long burying his emotions, refusing to deal with the rawness of his grief. He had convinced himself that he could move forward without fully understanding the impact of the past. "I've been trying," David continued, his voice breaking slightly. "But I don't know how to fix this, man. I don't know how to make it right. And I'm scared. Scared that I've already ruined everything, that I can't make up for the years I've lost. I just don't know where to start." Ethan felt a wave of frustration rising within him. He had been trying to be patient, trying to give David the benefit of the doubt, but the weight of everything, the past, the guilt, the anger, was starting to feel like too much. He wanted to forgive, but it was hard. He wanted to move forward, but the past was like an anchor, keeping him in place. "I don't know either," Ethan said, his voice trembling. "I want to believe that we can fix this. But it's not just about you and me, David. It's about everything that happened. It's about how much it hurt when you weren't there. It's about how alone I felt. And I don't know if I can just forget that." David's silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. Ethan's words hung in the air, and for a moment, neither of them knew how to proceed. Finally, David spoke again, his voice softer. "I get it, Ethan. I know I can't erase the past. But I'm trying. I know it's going to take time, but I'm not giving up on us. Not now. Not ever." Ethan exhaled slowly, feeling the tension in his chest loosen slightly. He wasn't ready to forgive completely, not yet, but hearing David's vulnerability, his admission of fear and regret, made Ethan realize something important. Forgiveness wasn't a one-time decision. It was a process, a journey, and they were both still in the middle of it. They were struggling, but they were still fighting. "I'm not giving up either," Ethan said quietly. "But I need time, David. I need time to figure out how to let go of everything." "I understand," David replied, his voice full of understanding. "We'll take it one step at a time." Ethan hung up the phone feeling both exhausted and strangely relieved. He still didn't have all the answers, and he still didn't know if things would ever truly be the way they once were, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like there was hope. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't perfect, but they were moving forward. And that, he realized, was enough for now. The days following his conversation with David had been a strange mix of clarity and confusion for Ethan. After all the years of tension and unsaid words, things between them had settled into a delicate balance. He could sense the shift, the promise of change, but he was still unsure of what that would look like. Would they finally be able to rebuild their relationship, or were they merely postponing the inevitable? One thing was clear: their journey wasn't over. It had barely even begun. It had been a few weeks since their last deep conversation, and things had felt quieter between them, less urgent. Ethan had found himself reflecting more on what had happened, on how far they'd come, and on what the future might hold. It was strange, this feeling of trying to move forward while still carrying the weight of the past. And yet, there were moments, small, fleeting moments, where he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could get back to a place where they were brothers again. It wasn't about forgetting the past, he realized. It was about accepting it, acknowledging it for what it was, and then deciding to move beyond it. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be quick. But it was possible. That afternoon, as Ethan was finishing up some work from home, his phone buzzed. It was a message from David. "Hey man, can we meet? I've been thinking a lot, and I think it's time we talked. For real." Ethan read the message, the familiar knot in his stomach tightening. He hadn't expected this. They hadn't spoken in a couple of weeks, not beyond the occasional text or brief phone call. But this felt different. The words "for real" hung in the air, like they held weight beyond their simple meaning. Ethan knew it was time for the final conversation. The one that would either solidify their efforts or tear them apart for good. He quickly typed back, agreeing to meet at the same brewery where they had had their first conversation after their mother's death. The place had become somewhat of a neutral ground for them, a space where they could step away from their past and talk without the pressure of familiar environments. It felt fitting that they would meet there again. When Ethan arrived, David was already seated at a table, a half-empty beer in front of him. He looked like he hadn't been sleeping much, his face more tired than usual, his shoulders a little slumped. The past few weeks had clearly taken their toll on both of them. But this meeting, this moment, was important. They both knew it. Ethan walked up to the table, pulling out the chair across from David. He sat down, his movements slow and deliberate. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply looked at each other, taking in the changes that had happened between them. David was the first to break the silence. "Ethan, I don't know what to say," he began, his voice unsteady. "I've been thinking about everything, about how much I've messed up. And I know that no matter what I say, I can't undo the past. But I can try to make it right. And I'm asking you, man, to give me that chance. To let me prove that I can be the brother you need." Ethan swallowed, his chest tight. He could hear the sincerity in David's voice, but it was still hard to believe that things could really change. They had both hurt each other so much. Could they really repair this? "I'm not going to lie, David," Ethan said quietly. "I don't know if I can forgive you completely. Not yet. There's too much anger, too much pain. And maybe that's something I need to work through on my own. But I do know this." He paused, his eyes locking onto David's. "I'm willing to try. I'm willing to see where this goes because you're my brother, and I can't just walk away from that." David's eyes softened, relief flooding his face. It wasn't the full forgiveness he had hoped for, but it was a step forward. It was all they could do, take things one step at a time. "I'll take that, Ethan," David said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll take whatever you're willing to give. And I'll keep showing up. Because that's what matters. I'm not going anywhere. I don't want to lose you again." Ethan nodded, the lump in his throat growing. The words felt heavy, more than he had anticipated. But it was the truth. As much as he had been hurt, he didn't want to lose David either. The journey to healing wasn't going to be easy, but at least they were finally facing it together. "I'm not asking for everything to be perfect," Ethan said, his voice steady. "I'm just asking for a chance. A real chance." David smiled, a small but genuine smile. "That's all I'm asking for too." They sat there for a while longer, talking about the future, about the things they wanted to change, the things they wanted to leave behind. The conversation was no longer about blame, no longer about what had gone wrong. It was about moving forward, even if they didn't have all the answers. It was about rebuilding trust, step by step. By the time they left the brewery, it was clear to both of them that this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The beginning of something new, something fragile, yet full of potential. They were brothers again, not because everything was perfect, but because they were willing to try. They were willing to fight for each other, for the bond that had once been so strong, and that they were now carefully rebuilding, piece by piece. As they said their goodbyes in the parking lot, Ethan felt a weight lift from his shoulders, the weight of years of anger and frustration. It wasn't gone completely, but it was lighter now. They still had work to do, still had to face the hard stuff, but for the first time in a long time, Ethan believed it could be done. And maybe, just maybe, they would find a way to build something better from the ashes of the past. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?